The snow had been falling since noon, the quiet kind that muffles everything and makes the whole street look like it's been put away for the night, when someone knocked on Gideon Ibarra's door at 6:20 on a Thursday. He wasn't expecting anyone. His daughter Isla was doing homework at the kitchen table, her pencil tapping against the wood in the absent rhythm she always fell into when she was thinking hard. He'd been standing at the stove watching a pot of lentil soup that didn't need watching, just needing something to do with his hands after a long day of other people's children and their complicated feelings about long division. Nobody knocked at his door on weeknights without texting first. Not since Fiona died. He crossed the living room and pulled the door open. The woman standing on his porch was not someone he would have placed immediately in the low yellow light. She was somewhere in her early 40s, dark coat, dark hair, pulled back with a kind of precision that meant it had been done deliberately rather than quickly. She was holding a leather folio against her chest and looking at him the way people look at things they've rehearsed, seeing from a distance and now have to face up close. The snow was catching in her hair, and she didn't seem to notice. Then she said his name, and everything in his chest did something complicated. Gideon. He hadn't heard that particular voice in 11 years. I know I owe you an explanation. She said it before he could say anything at all, before he could decide what face to make or what tone to take. I know I owe you more than that. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here because my mother is dying and she asked me to find you, and I need you to understand why before I ask you for anything. Behind him, he heard Isla's chair scrape back from the table. He turned just enough. Stay in the kitchen, please. His daughter, 9 years old, perceptive as a smoke detector, appeared in the hallway anyway with wide, assessing eyes. She looked at the woman on the porch with the frank curiosity of a child who has learned that interesting things have a habit of showing up at doors and should be observed carefully. Isla. His voice was gentle but deliberate. She gave the woman one final comprehensive look and retreated without argument, which meant she was planning to listen from the hallway, which was exactly what Fiona used to do. He stepped back. Come in. Her name was Vivienne Tate Moreau. He'd known her for one summer, 11 years ago, before her family's construction company had made her into something they needed her to be. She came inside the way someone enters a room they've built a picture of from the outside and finds unexpectedly smaller than they imagined, careful, taking stock. Her low boots left small wet prints on the hardwood. She took in the hand-painted bookshelf against the far wall, Isla's drawings taped in a row above the radiator, the particular smell of a house where food is cooked from scratch and someone works with their hands. He closed the door and faced her. 11 years, he said. You disappeared, Vivian. Your number was disconnected inside of a month. You wrote me one letter and then nothing. I drove past your apartment and the building manager told me you'd moved without leaving a forwarding address. He kept his voice level because Isla was almost certainly in the hallway. And now you're in Ottawa in the snow on a Thursday telling me your mother is dying. She didn't look away. I know. Then tell me why. She looked at the couch. Solid, low, maple frame, something he'd built himself the year after Fiona died because the grief had needed somewhere to go. She didn't sit, not yet. She stood with her folio held against her chest like a shield she knew wasn't going to be enough. My mother didn't tell me to stay away from you, Vivienne said. She did something worse. She convinced me you'd already gone. He waited. She told me you'd been offered a position in Winnipeg, that you'd accepted and moved without telling me because you didn't know how to say it was over, that you'd asked her specifically not to pass along your new contact information because a clean break was kinder. She said it flatly, the way people say things they've practiced saying without emotion so they can get through them. She showed me a text. From your number. I know now it wasn't from you, but at 29, alone in the middle of a family that wanted something specific from me, I had no reason to question it. The room held the sound of the heating system ticking, snow against the window, nothing else. She fabricated a text message, Gideon said. She fabricated a text message. Vivienne closed her eyes briefly, and she arranged for your number to be redirected so that when I called, I got a generic message. She was thorough, Gideon. My mother does not do things by halves. Something moved across her face that was too complicated to be just anger or just grief. I found out 2 weeks ago. She's been in palliative care since September, and last week she asked to speak to me alone and she told me everything. She gave me back the letter you sent after mine. She'd kept it. Opened, read, kept in a box in her study like a file. She sat down then, not on the couch but on the arm of the chair by the window, because his legs had made a decision his spine hadn't caught up with yet. Why did she do it? It wasn't quite a question. He already knew the shape of the answer. He just needed to hear her say it. Because Tate Moreau Construction was in the middle of the largest contract it had ever signed. Because my brother had just made a mess of the company's reputation with the Gatineau project and my mother needed me steady, focused, visible. And because you were a primary school teacher from Centertown whose father had run an auto repair shop and whose mother cleaned office buildings, and she had decided without telling me that you were not the version of Vivienne Tate Moreau she needed the public to see. Vivienne set the folio down on the side table. Her hands, free now, were not entirely steady. She genuinely believed she was protecting the company. She told me she'd thought you'd both move on, find other people. She said she told herself it was temporary pain for a permanent good. Gideon looked at his hands. 11 years. He'd had a real life in those 11 years. He'd met Fiona 2 years after Vivienne disappeared, fell in love in the slow way Fiona used to say was the only kind worth trusting, got married on a Saturday in July in her parents' backyard in Kingston, had watched Fiona get sick and get sicker and then not wake up on a Tuesday morning when Isla was 4 years old. He'd built a whole architecture of living since then, good and honest and unglamorous. He was not the same person, but he remembered very clearly the month after Vivienne's letter, the specific quality of that silence. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. He looked up. Isla. A pause. Then footsteps, and his daughter materialized in the hallway doorway with the expression of someone who has decided the best strategy is on a surrender. I wasn't eavesdropping, she said. I was just very close to where the conversation was happening. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Vivienne. Isla, this is Vivienne Tate Moreau. She's someone I knew a long time ago. Isla studied Vivienne with the same careful attention she gave to anything she decided was significant. Before, how long before? A long time. Isla seemed to accept this provisional answer as a placeholder. She looked at Vivienne directly. Are you okay? You look like you've been crying. Vivienne blinked. Something shifted in her expression, something that had been held carefully in place all evening. I have been a little. My mum is very sick. My mum died, Isla said. Not cruelly, just factually, the way children sometimes tell the hard truth because they haven't yet learned to soften it before offering it. When I was 4, it's really sad when that happens. Yes, Vivienne said quietly, it is. Isla looked at her for another moment. Do you want some soup? Dad made too much. He always makes too much. Gideon opened his mouth to redirect her, but Vivienne said very softly, I would actually like that very much. And so Isla led a stranger into their kitchen with the unself-conscious authority of a child who has decided something is the right thing to do. Gideon made coffee. His hands needed something to do. He could feel Vivienne's eyes on the back of his neck, taking in the drawings on the refrigerator, the stack of marked homework on the counter, the small chaos of a household run by one person who is very tired by the time evening comes. Isla sat back down at her homework, occasionally glancing up to include their guest in whatever she was currently thinking about. Vivienne sat with her hands wrapped around a mug and answered Isla's questions with a directness that surprised him. Isla tended to work out quickly who would give her real answers and who would condescend, and she'd clearly placed Vivienne in the former category. When Isla finally gathered her books and retreated to her room with the brisk pragmatism of someone who has decided the adults need the room, Vivienne looked at Gideon across the small table. She's wonderful, she said. She's everything. Her mother, Fiona. She passed 3 years ago. He wrapped his hands around his own mug. I'm sorry. Thank you. He paused. But you didn't come here to hear about my life. No. She looked at her coffee. I came because she asked me to. And because when I found the truth, I realized I couldn't not come. I needed you to know it wasn't a choice I made. Whatever you do with that, whatever you feel about all of it, I needed you to know. Here's what the story doesn't make obvious, if you're listening carefully. Vivienne Tate Moreau had driven 4 hours from Toronto in a snowstorm. She had not called first because she'd been afraid he would say don't come, and she needed to be able to say what she had to say face to face, not managed through a phone screen. She had rehearsed this conversation 17 different ways in parking lots and service station bathrooms on the 416, and none of the versions had included his daughter offering her soup. Will you see her? Vivienne asked. My mother. She has 2 weeks, maybe less. She wants to apologize to you directly, not just to me for you. To you. Gideon stood and moved to the window. The street outside was entirely white now, the snowfall steady and serious. His reflection in the glass was dark and slightly ghostly, the face of a man trying to find the exact weight of a thing before he decided what to do with it. She doesn't deserve to have me there, he said quietly. I know, she cost me something I don't get back. I know that too. And you're asking anyway. Yes. He could hear that it cost her something. She's my mother, and she's dying. And I don't know how to be in that room without at least having tried. He was quiet for long enough that the only sound was the snow and the distant sound of Isla's radio through the wall, something low and string-heavy that Fiona would have loved. "Let me think about it," he said. "That's all I have right now." For the first time since she'd knocked on his door, Vivian looked like something in her had unclenched. "That's more than I expected." After she left, he stood in the kitchen for a long time. The soup was still warm on the stove. Isla's second bowl was half finished on the table. He sat in the chair where Vivian had been sitting and tried to get his bearings. Isla came back in her socks, quiet as a cat, and sat across from him. "Was she your girlfriend?" she asked. "Yes." "A long something happened and you lost her?" "Yes." Isla thought about this in the measured, unhurried way she processed most things. "Was it sad?" "At the time. Then I met your mom and it became part of a story I stopped thinking about. But now you have to think about it again." "Yes." She reached across the table and patted his hand once, businesslike, the way she did when she was being deliberately matter-of-fact about something that wasn't. Then she pulled his soup toward her. "Can I finish this? Mine got cold." She looked up at him as she helped herself. "Are you going to go see her mom?" "I don't know. Mom used to say that when something is hard to decide, it's usually because you already know the answer and you're just not sure you're allowed to act on it yet." She took a spoon. "Do you know the answer?" He looked at his daughter and felt the particular tightening in his chest that came when she said something true that was too accurate for a 9-year-old. "Maybe," he said. "I think you should go," she said, eating. "Not for her mom, for yourself." So you know what she would have said. He noticed the pronoun slip. He didn't mention it. That night, after Isla was asleep, he sat at the small desk in the living room where he kept the things that mattered and didn't have anywhere else to go. In the bottom of the deep drawer, under lesson plans and a folder of Isla's earliest drawings, there was a letter in a plain white envelope. 11 years old, the paper slightly stiff at the edges. He'd read it so many times in the first year that he'd stopped rereading it after that. Not because it had stopped mattering, but because he'd memorized it, and reading it again only added to the ache without adding to the understanding. He didn't take it out. He just rested his hand on the drawer and thought. His phone lit up. Unknown number. "It's Vivian. I wanted to say thank you for hearing me out tonight. Isla is remarkable. I meant that. If you decide to come, my mother is at St. Michael's Palliative Unit in Toronto. She usually has good hours in the late morning. If you decide not to come, I understand. Either way, I'm sorry, Gideon. For all of it." More than I know how to say in a text, he read it typed. "I'll be there, Thursday, 10 o'clock. He sent it before he could talk himself out of it, because Isla was right. He already knew. The palliative unit at St. Michael's had the particular quality of places that exist outside the normal tempo of things. Quieter, slower, lit differently. Gideon took the elevator to the 4th floor on a gray Thursday morning with the city's first real cold snap pressing against the windows, and walked down a hallway where everything was considered, gentle, designed to cause as little additional pain as possible. A nurse led him to a room at the end. Vivian was waiting outside the door. She was in a wool blazer and dark trousers, her hair loose for the first time, and she looked like someone who had slept badly and was keeping that very orderly. "She knows you're coming," Vivian said. "She asked that I give you a few minutes alone with her first." Gideon looked at the closed door. "She's sure. She was very specific about it." He nodded once. Then he pushed the door open. Meredith Tate, because she had always kept her husband's name for the company's sake even after he left, was a woman who had once walked into boardrooms and rearranged the furniture of everyone's expectations simply by sitting down. She had been, by every account Gideon had ever received secondhand, a force. The kind of woman who made decisions with the velocity of certainty and never circled back. The woman in the bed was diminished by the illness in the way illness always diminishes, the architecture still visible but the force behind it gone somewhere else. Only her eyes remained sharp. "Mr. Ibarra." Her voice was careful and thin. "You came. I wasn't sure I would," he said honestly. He sat in the chair beside her bed because it seemed important to be at the same level. "But I'm here. I'm glad." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness. I don't think I've earned the right to ask. But I owe you the truth told to your face and an accounting of what I took from you, and I'm capable of that much if you're willing to hear it." He nodded. She told him. All of it in the careful, meticulous way of a woman who had managed information as a professional practice, each step described with the same clinical precision with which it had presumably been executed. The diverted number, the fabricated message, The letter opened and read and kept. The story she had built around it for Vivienne's benefit in the months that followed. How she had managed the narrative the way she managed contracts. With foresight and follow-through, anticipating the questions and having the answers ready. I told myself, she said, and here something flickered in her face, the first sign of cost, that Vivienne would be better. That the company needed her completely for 2 years, maybe 3, and after that she would meet someone appropriate, and the thing with you would be a memory she was grateful not to have acted on. I told myself I was making a temporary decision with her future in mind. A breath. I have had 11 years to understand what I actually did. You decided for her, Gideon said. Yes. The word sat between them with nothing soft around it. She was 30 years old. She had a degree in civil engineering. She'd managed a $12 million project in Sudbury without supervision. And you decided she couldn't be trusted with her own heart. Meredith didn't look away, yes, and I was wrong, and I need you to hear me say that directly. Gideon looked out the window at the gray November sky. The Toronto skyline flat and familiar. He thought about Fiona. About the morning she'd come into the staff room at Elgin Street Public, with coffee for both of them, and he'd noticed for the first time that she had a habit of watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. About Isla being born, and the specific weight of that first day. About the last months, when Fiona had been the one doing the difficult practical work of making sure the people she loved would be okay when she couldn't be there to help them. He thought about whether he would trade any of it to have had a different life from the start. The answer was complicated in a way that only parents understand. I can't forgive you, he said. I want to be honest about that. What you did had consequences I'll carry the rest of my life. Not all of them were bad, but I didn't get to choose, I know, and it seems to me that Vivian is still paying the cost of what you decided, not just me. Meredith's eyes closed briefly. She is. That is the thing I am most ashamed of. Not losing you your future, though I'm ashamed of that too, but who she became inside the structure I built around her. She is brilliant. She runs the company better than I ever did, and she is profoundly alone. A rattling breath. I made her into exactly what I intended and nothing I hoped for. The silence was full. Gideon sat inside it for a while without trying to fill it. Talk to her, Meredith said finally. That's the only thing I'm asking. Not for me. She doesn't need you for my sake. She needs someone to know her from before all of this. Someone who knew who she was when she hadn't yet decided she wasn't allowed to want things. He stood, looked at this woman who had redrawn the map of 2 lives without asking. He thought about what Isla had said about his mother's saying. He thought about the letter in the drawer. I'm not going to carry this, he said. Not for you, but I'm also not going to carry it for myself. I'm putting it down because I'm tired and I have a daughter who needs a father who isn't weighted down by other people's choices. He paused. I'll talk to Vivienne. Not because you asked me to, because it's the right thing. He turned and walked out. In the hallway, Vivienne was standing at the window. Her arms were crossed, her coffee untouched in her hand. How did it go? She asked without turning. She said what she needed to say. Vivienne turned. Her eyes were red at the corners in the careful, controlled way of someone who has been holding things in for an extended period and is running low on capacity. And I told her I couldn't forgive her. He looked at Vivienne directly. But I'm not going to carry it either. There's a difference. That's more generous than she deserved. It's not for her. He paused. It's for Isla. She needs a dad who isn't bitter. Another pause. And if I'm being honest, it's a little bit for you. Something moved across Vivienne's face. Gideon, not here. He gestured gently down the hallway. Get a coffee with me, a real one, not a hospital coffee. Tell me who you've been for the last 11 years. All of it, not the version in the press release. Vivienne looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone stepping on ice they're not entirely sure will hold. Then she said, yes, okay, yes. 6 months is a long time when you're paying attention. Spring came to Ottawa, and then summer, the kind of humid July that makes the Rideau Canal shimmer, and everyone in the city remember that they chose to live there on purpose. In those months, the shape of Gideon's days changed in small ways that accumulated without announcing themselves. Vivienne drove up from Toronto on weekends when she wasn't traveling. On the others, they talked on the phone after Isla was in bed, the conversation starting as catch-up and expanding into territory that had nothing to do with practicalities. He learned that she ran in the mornings no matter what, that she kept a shelf of unread novels she fully intended to get to, that she had a specific relationship with silence, comfortable in it, in a way most people aren't, needing it the way some people need sound. She learned that he still wrote letters by hand sometimes when he needed to think through something, that he could spend 45 minutes looking at a problem from the wrong angle and then solve it completely in the shower, that he kept a journal for Isla, not a diary, but a record. Things she'd said, things he wanted to remember, things he didn't want her to lose when he was gone. Meredith died in December. Vivian called him from the hospital parking lot on a Sunday morning, her voice stripped down to its simplest register. "She's gone. I'm coming," he said. He arranged for Isla to stay with the neighbors and drove the 4 hours in a light snowfall that felt somehow appropriate. He found Vivian in the company's Ronto townhouse, sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the island, still in her coat. She looked less like a VP and more like someone who had been walking a long time and needed to stop. He sat down on the floor beside her without saying anything. Sometimes that is the only useful thing. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He stayed there until she was ready to stand. He was still in Toronto at Christmas. Isla came down on the train with her backpack and her headphones and a list of restaurants she wanted to try, vetted thoroughly from online sources and presented with the authority of someone who considers herself the household expert on this particular topic. She assessed Vivian's apartment with a professional eye and declared the kitchen excellent and the living room in need of more plants. Vivian took this seriously. By New Year's, there were 4 new plants on the windowsill, all of which Isla had selected via video call. "She's basically moved in," Isla told him one evening in February, referring to the plants. "The plants have," Gideon agreed. "Dad." He looked at his daughter. "You know I'm fine with it," she said. She was 10 now, half an inch taller than she'd been at Christmas, and already developing the particular tone of someone who finds adults slow on the uptake. "You don't have to manage it around me, I like her. She gives me actual answers when I ask questions, and she doesn't treat me like I'm too young to understand things." She went back to her book. "Also, she's been waiting for months, I can tell. She gets a very specific look when you're not paying attention." "What kind of look?" Isla looked up. "The same one you get when you think she's not paying attention." She returned to her book. "You're both quite obvious." He sat with that for a moment. The following Saturday, he asked Vivian to walk with him, just the two of them, along the Rideau River path where the ice was just starting to soften at the edges, the first suggestion of spring underneath. They walked without talking much for a while, the way people walk when they are comfortable with each other and don't need to fill silence to prove it. "I need to tell you something," Vivian said eventually. She was looking at the river, not at him. "Something I've been working up to for a while." He waited. "I'm not good at this," she said. "I should say that first. I built walls after everything that happened, and I'm aware of the walls, and knowing they're there doesn't actually make them easier to take down." She took a breath. "But I'm trying. I'm trying with you in a way I haven't tried with anyone since before any of this, and I need you to know that." He slowed his pace, looked at her profile against the gray February sky. "I know," he said. "I can see it." She turned to look at him. Her expression was open in a way he'd seen coming for months, carefully, gradually, the way the ice on the river revealed the current underneath. "I spent 11 years being what the company needed. Efficient, available, untangled. I was good at it. I am good at it." She stopped walking. "And then you opened the door in the snow and I stood in your kitchen eating soup with your daughter, and I remembered what it felt like to be somewhere I actually wanted to be. I remember that evening," he said. "She offered me soup before she knew who I was," Vivian said. "She just saw someone who looked like they needed something warm. That's very Isla. It undid me a little." She looked at him steadily. "You've undone me a little, both of you. And I want you to know that I'm not here because I owe you something from 11 years ago. I'm here because this life you have, this small, loud, genuine life, is the thing I didn't know I was missing until I was standing in the middle of it." He looked at this woman, the one he'd known once, years ago before, the stranger she'd become in between. The person she was becoming now, slowly and honestly, in a way that felt like something you could build on. "I'm scared," he said. "I'll be honest about that. Fiona has been gone 4 years, and there are mornings I still reach over and then remember, and it costs me something every time. The idea of needing someone again," he stopped. "But Illa told me something months ago. She said her mother made her promise to make sure I didn't stay alone out of habit." Vivienne blinked. She was 9 when she said that? She was 9, she gets it from Fiona. He looked at her. "I'm scared. But I'm here, choosing to be here, with you." A pause. "If that's something you want, Gideon." She said it quietly, the way she'd said his name on his porch in the snow, but different. The same word, the same voice, a completely different weight. "I drove 4 hours in a blizzard to knock on your door on a Thursday evening because I needed you to know the truth. That's not a person who's on the fence." He laughed, genuinely, the kind that came unexpectedly. She was smiling, and it was the full version, the one with nothing held back, the one that changed her entire face and made her look like herself. He took her hand. They kept walking. The practical details followed in their own time, without being rushed. The Tate Moreau estate was considerable, and Vivienne handled it the way she handled everything, methodically, exhaustively, with full documentation. She gave the company to the management team she'd built over the past decade, retaining a board position that meant 2 days in Toronto a month and the rest of her time her own for the first time in her adult life. She opened a consulting practice in Ottawa that let her do the work she was actually good at without being the sole person keeping an institution standing. She did not immediately move in. They took that slowly and deliberately, because Isla was still 10, and some things deserved proper consideration. But Vivienne was there most evenings, and when she wasn't, she was on the phone, and her coat had been on the hook by Gideon's door for so long that Isla had started calling it her coat hook. One evening in early spring, they were going through paperwork at the kitchen table, the last of the estate documents, the foundation filings. When Isla came in from school, dropped her bag by the door, looked at the two of them, and said with the efficiency of someone reporting a fact, "Sophie from my class asked me today if you guys were getting married. I said I didn't know. I'd like to be able to give her a better answer." Then she went to the refrigerator and helped herself to an apple. Vivienne looked at Gideon across the table. He looked back. "She's not wrong that it's been a while," Vivienne said carefully. "She has a point," Gideon agreed. Vivienne set down her pen. She looked at him with the directness that was her most characteristic quality, the one that showed up in boardrooms and hospital parking lots and kitchen floors. The one he'd come to understand was not coldness, but its opposite. A refusal to waste time on indirection when the real thing was available. "I'm not going to be the kind of person who waits for the conventional version," she said. "You know that about me." "I do. So." She reached across the table and took both his hands. "Marry me, Gideon. Not because we've been together long enough, not because it's the obvious next step, because I love you. I loved you 11 years ago, and I love who you've become in the time I missed. And I love the way you talk to your daughter like she's a full person whose opinions about the things actually matter, which they do. I love that you drove to Toronto because a dying woman asked you to do a hard thing, and you decided it was the right call. Marry me and let's stop treating this like something that needs to be managed rather than chosen." Gideon looked at her hands in his. He thought about a 9-year-old eating soup with a stranger, about a letter that had been kept in a box for 11 years waiting, about Fiona saying, "In the last weeks you are going to be okay, and more than that, you're going to be happy, and when it happens I need you to let it." "Yes," he said. From the hallway, a sound that was distinctly and unmistakably a 9, now 10-year-old who had been standing right there the whole time. He raised his voice without turning around. "We know you're there, Isla." She appeared in the doorway with her apple and the brisk expression of someone who has been waiting for this outcome with professional patience. "Finally. Do you know how long I've been waiting to tell Sophie something definitive? It's been a whole situation." Vivienne laughed, the full one, the unguarded one. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, thank you." Isla looked between them with satisfaction. "Can we go to the Rideau place for dinner, the one with the good bread?" "We can go anywhere you want," Gideon said. "The bread place, then." She disappeared to put her bag away. "And I want to be part of the wedding planning. I have opinions about flowers. I would expect nothing less," Vivienne called after her. They sat for a moment at the kitchen table, the paperwork spread around them, the springlight coming in long and yellow through the window, the sounds of a house that had learned to hold things. "Are you happy?" Vivienne asked him. He thought about the word, let himself feel the full weight of it. "Yes," he said. "Not just managing, actually happy." She pressed her forehead briefly against his. Outside, the Ottawa spring was doing what it always did. Arriving late and without apology, the trees along the street finally breaking into leaf, the particular smell of thaw in the air that means everything dormant has decided to try again. Inside the small house on Euclid Avenue, a man who had once opened a door in a snowstorm and found his own history, standing on the other side, sat at a kitchen table with the woman who had knocked on it, surrounded by the paperwork of a life being actively rearranged. Listening to his daughter debate the merits of various Ottawa restaurants from the next room, and understood, fully, without qualification, that what had been lost had not been replaced but rebuilt into something that neither of them could have designed from the start. Some things only become possible on the other side of everything they cost you. That, in the end, was the debt, and it had been paid in the only currency that matters.